Hello everyone, I'm Professor Havens, and in this video I want to talk about the budget project. So the budget project is a project that all students in problem solving will have to complete, and the goal of the project is to create a personal budget for yourself. This video applies to all sections of problem solving, including other professors other than myself. And I wanted to take this time to talk a little bit about what you need to do, how to use Excel, and essentially the basics of the project. In a follow-up video, I'll be talking a little bit about the basics of Excel and some how-to with doing a few things. And there will be a short assignment due for this module that you'll need to complete before we have Thanksgiving break. But let's get right to it. A few things before we get into looking at the budget project PDF. But number one is you'll need to be submitting your budget project using an Excel spreadsheet. So this is not a paper or anything, and you do not need to do a write-up for this project. Well, there is a write-up component, and we'll get to that. But you'll need to submit this file in the XLSX file type. So some of you may not have Excel currently installed in your computer. And there are ways you can get Excel for free using Point Loma. So currently I don't actually have that posted in my module, the instructions for how to do that, but I will add that in after I finish this video. Anyways, if you do not use Excel, there are ways to convert it to an Excel file, but these come with some complications that we'll not get into right now. But anyways, getting into the budget project itself. So on your Canvas module, you need to download the Excel file as well as the instructions, which we'll look at first. And just your professor's file spreadsheet may look slightly different as well as their instructions, but the gist of the project should be the same. So for the budget project, let's just go ahead and read the overview. It says the goal of this project is to plan for and think about your future finances and how to live within your means. You will be asked to research or look up reasonable values for several categories of expenses. Your final submission will be a budget in Excel, download from Canvas, not from other sources, with your monthly costs, your annual costs, along with calculations that answer the questions at the end. So this is also something very important. You should be getting your Excel file from your professor's Canvas page, not another professor's, not another semester, not from the internet, not from anywhere else. And if you do plan to use a different file, you'll need to confirm with me first. And this is just my personal rule, because there may be a handful of you that have completed a budget project for another course. You can use that as the basis for this class, but you'll still need to submit the project, answer the questions, and do everything the project asks. So just follow up with me or your professor to know if that is allowable or not. But for the rest of us, let's get back to it. So the PDF instructions then list a number of different things you'll need to include in your budget. And before we get into these, for some of you guys, some of these things may be zero. Some of you guys may not currently have a credit card or be in credit card debt. And so credit card payments are not something you may have. And it's perfectly acceptable for something to be zero in your personal budget. But regardless of whether you have an expense or not, you still need to provide a justification for all of your expenses. And that's the secondary component of this project. So in addition to thinking about how much it might cost you to do all of these things, the justification tab will be in the justification tab, you'll provide a written instruction for why the number is what it is. And we'll kind of get into an example in just a minute as we look at Excel. And finally, once you've finished your budget, essentially thought through everything, then you'll need to answer 4 questions, which you can read about on the instructions. Let's get into the budget project file for a minute and just kind of walk through how it works. But there are 3 tabs, notably. The first one is the budget tab. This is where you'll be doing the math, the calculations for your budget, and then corresponding to each cell within the spreadsheet, there's a justification tab where, sorry, you guys probably can't see this thanks to the Winston cam. So So let me move this right here where you can see it a little bit better. Okay, let's continue. In the justification tab, you'll provide a verbal reasoning for why a number is what it is. And then in the summary tab, this is where you'll answer the questions by typing in numerical values that make sense here. So let's talk just a little bit about a simulated solution. So also, one other thing that I think is somewhat important is I'd suggest you use this budget project to start thinking ahead and planning for when you have finished school and you are starting your job. So your current finances may or may not be very interesting in the fact that as students, sometimes you don't have to pay for as many things as you do when you're on your own. I know for some of you guys, you already are paying rent and doing all those other things, but my point is don't plan for now necessarily, but plan for after you graduate. There's not really a timeline. And what I would say is do what makes sense for you. I want to make sure that this project is meaningful and actually helpful for you because most of our problem solving students have never created a personal budget before and have never really thought about the process of budgeting. And that's ultimately the goal of the project, is to at least start thinking about these things, especially as we dive into chapter 10 in our textbook, which is on some of the fundamental principles of finance. And as we get into chapter 10 in class, I think you'll we'll think about some of these numbers and how to calculate them in the coming weeks. But anyways, for example, let's say that after you graduate, you plan to move to Washington State or wherever it may be. And say you're wondering, well, I have no idea. How can I know what my rent will be until I get there? But the point is, you could always do a little bit of research and say, well, what's the average rent for an apartment in Seattle? Say you have a specific, you want to get a 2-bedroom. You may want to plan to have a roommate or a spouse, or, again, depending on your personal situation, you should spend a little time kind of thinking about how much rent might be. And let's say we come to the conclusion after, looking up averages or whatever, you could even find a fictional apartment to rent. It's up to you to put in as much time and energy as you want into this. And the more time and thought you put into it, the more helpful it will be as you actually, go into the future and start having these expenses. And also, it's perfectly acceptable that if you have these expenses already and you're not planning on a significant change in the next few years, that you just use your current value. So say you're already paying rent in San Diego, which would probably be $9,000, right? Then you can just use whatever you're currently doing as a basis. And as I said, make sure that you discuss that in your justification tab. So let's just say we settle on $2,000 for rent in what did I say, Washington? Anyways, now additionally, what I want you to do for all expenses, figure out how much it would cost per month as well as per year. And another feature of Excel is it functions like a calculator where you don't need to go type into your calculator, okay, 12 times 2,000 is 24,000, because Excel can actually do that math for you. In the follow-up video, I'll show you kind of how to do those sorts of things. And there'll be a little assignment for you to submit, to follow along and submit. But we'll get to that later. Let's just type in 24,000 for now. Also, some expenses are done on a yearly basis as opposed to a monthly basis. So let's just say what would be something that is often done every year. Well, let's say your federal taxes. To know your federal taxes, well, then we need to know what is our income. How much money are we making? And there's a fairly complicated system that kind of the more money you make, the higher the tax rate and so on. We'll talk a little bit about income taxes in class, but let's just say you've settled on that it's going to be $30,000 per year. The point is, if you have a yearly expense, you could divide by 12 to get that as a monthly expense. And as you're going through, fill in all the columns and come up with what's your total monthly and yearly expenses. Now, some expenses are not fixed expenses, meaning we can't really necessarily predict exactly what those would be, which we call variable expenses, such as food, gas, clothes, and so on, where we have a little bit of wiggle room. Gas may be more predictable if you have a very specific work schedule and you don't drive much otherwise. But, for the most part, these things may change from month to month. And the point of budgeting for them is what I would say is be a little bit on the safer side. Don't say, okay, I spend exactly $120 a month on food. It's better to budget on a little bit on the safe side. So if you're not really sure how much it costs to, budget for food, it might be good to sort of think about, if you eat out, if you go to the store, just kind of keep track of your expenses, and think about things. And also, you are allowed to ask your parents or your legal guardian or whoever, if you have friends or family, or it's not too uncommon for students to be planning these things with your spouse. If you do want to do this budget project with your fiance or spouse or whatever, you can definitely do this as a joint effort. You don't and get the help of your significant other, if that is how your life will be. But anyways, the point is, come up with some number that's reasonable. And also, if you're wondering, well, what's stopping me from just making up a bunch of numbers and kind of going from there? Well, that's the point of the justification tab. So in the justification tab, you should describe what went into that calculation in those numbers. So for example, like with the rent, if, I will be renting an apartment in Washington State, and I use this website, and you can even copy paste a link in here, which if you use the source to come up with this information, to determine this number, and etc. So what I would say is, the more effort you put into this, the more points you will get on the justification tab. Also, the rubric is posted in Canvas, so I would suggest you look through how it will be graded. But it is notable that you get a lot of points just for simply using the right file. If you are using the wrong Excel file and not downloading the one from Canvas, you will not do well on your grade. But anyways, for some of these things, you may have no idea how much is auto insurance, how much are car payments, how much is Social Security, Medicare, and so forth. Well, these are all good questions, and this is what we want you to think about as you plan for your future finances. Because, the saying, the only two things that are certain are death and taxes. You will have to pay taxes, and you will probably want to have insurance. So they're good things to think about. And again, using, say your parents as a good reference point would be a good starting point if you have no idea. So, as you're working on the budget, you should be filling all the numbers, thinking about things. Obviously, feel free to ask your professor, me, or your other professor, if you have questions or need help with anything. We are here to help. And, again, a good budget project will have all these filled in. And again, you can copy paste the link in here too, if you would like to provide a source. You do not have to though. So anyways, moving on to the last tab. So the summary tab, there are 4 questions, which again, read these on your own in the instructions. But essentially, once you're finished, the goal would be to say, what are my totals? How much am I spending per month? And also, I want you to think about how much are you making? What will your salary be? Again, it's another thing where if you're not really sure, you could say, well, I plan to be a PA in Washington. So what you could do is you could look at what's the annual salary for a PA in Washington State or whatever. You could use an average value, but location also matters quite a lot for salary. And again, make sure to provide your reasoning in your justification. So I think this video has gone long enough. But anyways, in the next video, I'll show you how to essentially do math using Excel and a spreadsheet. Because this is one of Excel's most important features, is not just a way to store information and put it in a way that's easy to look at in the form of a table, but it also has thousands of built-in mathematical functions, and it can do all the math we need for basic things like budgeting and many else. Anyways, I'll see you in the next video.